Alright, welcome back YouTube. So as I said in the last video, I'm going to go ahead and start with some disassembly. So this is going to be kind of a how-to video. I'll try and go step by step as best I can through the process. So just to mention ahead of time, I think one of the most important things when it comes to disassembling a car, especially if you're not extremely familiar with it, whereas I'm not sure where you're at, but organization is really important for me. So basically, I want to make sure that whatever I take apart, I'm going to be able to get back together. So I've created kind of a system that seems to work well for me. So what I do is I like to use bins. So I've got kind of bins here. I bought like 10 of these guys. And then I've got a marker handy. And when I take a certain section of parts apart, essentially, so like if I disassemble, say, the intercooler, then any bolts or whatever I can just throw in here and label it intercooler, and then I send it over in a designated area. That way, you know, I don't lose track of what went where. I also like to use these bags, essentially, so if there's not, you know, enough hardware, whatever, that warrants using a container this big, I'll just throw the bolts and such in a bag. I'll go ahead and write intercooler on there as an example, tape it to the intercooler and set it aside. You know, that way I don't lose track of what I'm doing. The other important thing that I like to do is labeling things. So once again, I'm going to use this tape, and there's obviously, you know, dozens of connectors, tubes, wires, and things that need to be disconnected on this car, and I like to basically label both ends of them. It does take a little bit, but when it goes to reassembly, you are going to be very grateful that you did. So that's kind of the first step, is just organize your garage, make sure everything's set up. You can see here as well that I kind of set up the most likely tools that I'm going to be using here. I've got a workbench over here with quite a few more tools, but these are the ones that probably are going to disassemble 90% of this stuff. So I like to have those handy and just convenient. Otherwise, even after a few hours of working on my car, stuff's going to be scattered everywhere. So I've just noticed that it pays to be organized and saves time in the long run. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with disassembly. Alright, so we're going to get started with disassembly. So I'm probably going to start by removing the top mount intercooler, and then the intake, and then probably drain the coolant, because we are going to have to remove this this reservoir right here. And then from there, we're going to remove the alternator and kind of slowly start disassembling things, with kind of an ultimate goal of getting this intake manifold off, okay? We're going to start by disassembling the top mount intercooler. So for this, we're going to need a 12 mil socket with an extension. I've been trying to use this power ratchet more often because it is actually pretty nice. So you've got basically a connecting bolt or a mounting bolt on both sides of this, holding the top mount in place. So we're going to crack those loose and remove them. We got one. And then two. And those are both 12 millimeter. That one does not want to come. There we go. Okay, and then we have these two 12 millimeter bolts, which are securing this, which I believe is part of the crankcase ventilation system. So these ones are shorter. Just keep in mind that the longer ones are for the mounts, and then the shorter ones are here for the crankcase ventilation tubing. So I'm going to set those right there. And then we've got 2 more 12mm bolts here connecting the bypass valve onto the top mount. So same thing. I kind of like to loosen these a little bit at a time just so that we don't warp the surface, because we want to make sure that we maintain a good seal when it comes to reinstallation. And then just be careful you don't drop that lock washer. Okay, and then there is a gasket in there, so be mindful of that. We don't want that to slip down. So I'm going to try and slip my fingers underneath here to try and pop this gasket off. It's pretty secure. I probably could have actually just left it, but okay, so that's the gasket. Okay, so we have this is loose, but we still have the top mount connected to both the throttle body and to the turbo, so we need to disconnect both of those. I believe this is an 8mm. It could be a 6mm. Okay, it is an 8mm. So we're going to need to use the smaller ratchet because this is 1/4 inch drive. And then we're going to need a smaller extension as well. I'm going to use this extension because it has a bit of a wobbly end, which will come in handy. So we're going to go ahead and loosen just this one connected to the throttle body. Okay, so now we've got this one loose. And we probably could have disconnected either one of those actually. And then we've got that one down there, hopefully you guys can see it, connecting the turbo. So I'm going to use a bigger extension for this, but still a wobbly extension if possible. You could probably use a screwdriver as well, but I prefer to use a socket on these. I feel like it just works easier. It takes less pressure, forward pressure to get it to turn. Whoops. Because otherwise what will happen is that clamp will twist and then it's a real pain in the butt to get any looser. So I like to loosen it a little bit with the ratchet and then loosen it quite a bit by hand so that hopefully everything comes off easily. Okay, so that's loose, that's loose. We'll set that over there for now. So I think that this should be about ready to come off. Now this thing can be a little tricky to actually get off, so I like to wiggle it and move it back. And that kind of pops the throttle body coupler as well as that turbo coupler off. And then it looks like this little tube here is connected, so we just have to pop that out of that bracket. And then it just takes a little bit of wiggling and I kind of turn it this way and eventually it comes out. And here we are. We have ourselves a top mount intercooler. We'll set that right there. So this is all the supplies or all the hardware that I removed with it. So what I like to do, as I mentioned before, I'm just going to put all of these in a bag. Boom. I'll probably put this in here as well. I'm going to be careful not to disrupt it. I probably will get a new gasket, but I want to be gentle with it regardless. And then I'll just put top mount. Okay. And then I've organized this area down here to set all of the parts that I remove. I like to try and place them in here in a systematic order from left to right. And the reason why is that way when I go to put everything back together, it's just easier to find everything. So then I'm gonna just take this and set it right up there. Perfect. All right, so the top mount is now off. So now we've got a clear view down there. We can see the turbo shield. This is the wideband that I installed. So I think what we'll remove next is this SF intake. So for this, I know that it's going to take a 4mm Allen. Perfect, that looks right. We're going to go ahead and use this power ratchet again. It's because it's a little bit faster. And there's 4 of these guys. And we just need to be careful not to lose the fancy washers that it comes with. Uh-oh. I just lost one of the fancy washers. I should probably take my own advice. Okay, here's this one. These washers are slippery and super easy to lose. I lose one almost every time I disassemble this. So then there's one left here. Okay, we've got that one. And then this whole piece comes off. And that reveals the kind of this box that the air filter sits in. It'd be nice to get this guy out of the way. I probably should have done that before, but it's not necessary. So this is just a Phillips, as you can see. So we will grab a Phillips. See if we can get these guys to pop off. And these are actually like little press-in brackets, if you're able to see these. So really the screw just causes the distal portion of this bracket to expand. So these kind of just push in and then you screw it and then that holds everything in place. So this should just pop right off. Yep. So I'm just gonna put kind of these clips in with this all together as far as safekeeping goes. And I had a screwdriver somewhere. Okay, here's the flashlight. I want to see if I can find that missing piece. So I will eventually, oh, here's that washer that I lost, so it's down here. Perfect. Okay, so I have all 4 washers. I have all 4 screws. All right, so now we need to remove the rest of this guy. So this is the mass airflow sensor. So we're gonna go ahead and disconnect this. So this is an opportunity for labeling. As I mentioned before, it takes a little bit of extra time, but it's well worth labeling everything as you take it apart. So the way that I like to do this is with this blue tape. And typically I have some scissors. It's kind of hard to do with gloves on. Anyway, so what I typically do is I'll just start with numbers. So I'll go 1 and then 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and label this guy with a 1. Kind of label it onto itself here. That way when I put it all back together, it's easy to remember that this is the mass airflow sensor. In fact, what I might even do, I didn't do this previously, but what I may do on some of these is go MAF. That may be helpful just to remember exactly where that goes. And then I'm going to go ahead and throw this one around this guy. We're about to take this off. It does not, none of this has to be perfect. Just so it connects onto itself there. Perfect. So we've got that labeled. So let's go ahead and remove this guy. So it looks like this is actually secured to the car with this 10 millimeter, I believe. So we're going to go ahead and grab a 10 millimeter. And once again, we're going to use an extension. And I'm not sure how well you can see that, but there's a 10 millimeter bolt right down there. And that essentially is holding this this mass airflow housing, which is this right here that I just taped, in place. I don't know how easy this is going to be to reach. Actually, I think I need a longer extension. I'm just going to add an extra extension. See if that gives me enough length. Perfect. Okay, we're getting it. So we're going to try not to lose this guy. Perfect. So we've got that. And now this whole thing should be loose. Perfect. And then I'm assuming that this box is secured in another area, but let's start by removing this MAF housing now that we've got it loose. So to do that, we're going to need to loosen this, which once again is 8 millimeters. So kind of the same thing. Start it with the ratchet and then, yeah, I may have gone even too loose on this. I went all the way. That's okay. What I'll typically do, or what I like to do, if I can, is move this in any bolts or hardware that I can leave in place. I like to leave in place, that way it's obvious where they go. So we'll just slide this up a pinch here and just put it back on, just barely snug it all just to keep it there. And that way we don't risk chance of losing it. So now this MAF housing should break free of this inlet. Okay. So now this is caught underneath the box. All right, so here is the Cobb SF MAF housing and air filter. And what we probably could have done, actually, we could have just disconnected this here at this inlet, but it may have been a little bit trickier to fish out, but either way is totally fine. Okay, now with this box, as I said, I think it's probably connected elsewhere, so we can see right here that it's connected with what appears to be another 10 mil. This one is going to require a shorter extension, so we're just going to switch to this little guy. And I always like to warn anyone who is using a ratchet like this, just be very mindful that you're on there well, and preferably that you've broke the bolt loose before you activate it. It's very easy to strip bolts using something like that. Okay, so this just now comes right up. I'm gonna take this and just put it back in here loosely. As I said, just to, you know, hopefully we can prevent losing it by doing that. We can probably do the same thing with this guy. Actually, yeah, we can put that guy back there. Actually, I'm gonna just package this up with the rest of this stuff. I changed my mind. This one I think I will leave here. Okay, so this is kind of all the parts involved with the SF intake. So we need to stack all these up and put these away in an order that we're not going to lose anything. So I don't think that we need to put this in a bin. I don't think we need necessarily a full bin for any of this stuff. Well, maybe we should put this in the big bin, actually, because this is a lot of stuff. Actually, I'm debating here, sorry. Actually, what we'll do, I'm probably not going to be reusing any of this, so what we'll probably do is just set this in here. There's a chance we'll be reusing some of it. This we'll definitely be reusing. So we're going to put this over here. Actually, let's do this. We'll bag this up and we'll put all these parts together over there. So I'm going to be switching to a bigger MAF inlet, because what will happen as you go up in power is you'll max out MAF housing, essentially, or a MAF sensor. It's called a pegged MAF sensor. And so basically what happens is it won't, it'll get to a certain amount of airflow and it won't have the ability to read anymore. So as you start getting into high boost and higher horsepower, you either need a different MAF sensor, a bigger MAF sensor housing, or, as you know, a lot of people switch to speed density. I forgot to label this one, so I'm going to mark this. We'll call this the SF intake. Perfect. All right, so SF intake, we're just going to set this over here. Okay. All right, so then let's go ahead and remove this guy, the rest of this. I'm just going to put a couple of these things away really quick, just so that we're not getting too cluttered up here, which we already are. I try and stay fairly organized, as it does in the long run make things faster, but it can be difficult to do. Actually, we're going to need this. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to go ahead and remove this. So once again, it's going to be an 8mm for this big clamp. We'll loosen it a little bit with the ratchet, loosen it the rest of the way by hand, and it should pop loose. Okay, and then once it's popped loose, we should be able to wiggle this guy to get this guy off of here. Perfect. And then I'm going to just go ahead and set this with all this other stuff as well over here. That probably, actually a bin probably would make sense for that. Okay, so the next thing that we need to work on is we do need to get this alternator off. So you can see that I've already removed the battery. We also need to disconnect this upper reservoir tank. And then we're going to need to remove this guy as well, which is the secondary air pump. And I'm going to end up just deleting this. This is the evap stuff. I'm going to end up deleting this as well. And then I'm also going to end up deleting the TGVs. Let's go ahead and start by removing this upper reservoir tank. So I'm going to grab some good pliers and I'm going to grab a good screwdriver and we'll see what we need here. So these little clamps you just squeeze. I like to move them up and let them go. Now this could easily be disconnected up here, but if we do that, then we're going to be dealing with these long tubes the entire time. So I'd prefer to do it here and just get as much out of the way as possible. So I'm going to grip this and gently twist as I pull. And this guy should pop off. Good, not too much drainage. I forgot to mention I did drain the majority of the coolant before doing this. Okay, so now we'll go ahead. Uh-oh, this is draining a bit. I'm gonna grab a paper towel. Trying to avoid spilling as much as possible. Okay, same thing here. Okay, these apparently are not done leaking, so that is not very cool. So I'm just going to try and catch what I can so that it doesn't leak all over the floor. Okay, as I said before, we want to keep track of where everything goes. So I like to label this stuff. This is pretty obvious, it only goes one way. But when we go to put everything back together, things tend to look a little bit different. So a lot of this stuff can be difficult to tape onto. Okay, so we're gonna go 2, and then we're gonna end up going 3. So we'll go 2, 2. This one has to be tight. This one might not stay on very well, but that's okay. And then we're gonna go 3. And these essentially are just the coolant lines connecting to the coolant upper reservoir tank. Okay, so we've got these disconnected. So now we have some more lines that we need to disconnect. So we've got one underneath right here. I'm afraid this one may end up leaking. And then we've got this guy right here, which connects to the turbo. Another thing that I would recommend is just taking pictures of all this stuff. I'm obviously videotaping this as I go, so I'm not convinced that pictures are necessary because I can kind of go back if I need to and watch the video to see where everything is. Okay, I'm gonna grab some paper towels just to have it handy in case this does start to leak, which I fear it very well may. Let's just disconnect. I'd like to disconnect this bottom one if we can. Let's see if we can. Some of this stuff I'll actually label before I even take it apart, which can be handy. So I'm just kind of pulling on this. Oh, and it's not leaking. That's fantastic. Okay, so we've got this guy. And then underneath the turbo, or underneath the reservoir, we've got this guy right here. So this one, I think we're pretty much going to be forced to remove this right here. We might need a different set of pliers. Same thing, we're gonna squeeze these little squeeze clamps and kind of wiggle them and try and get them over the hump. Good. And then grab and twist. Try and be gentle if we can so that we don't tear open the hose. It's nice to be able to just reuse these. They're kind of a pain in the butt to get. Good, that one didn't leak either. Fantastic. Okay. So now we're gonna go ahead and label. So we're on the number 4, 4, 4. So 4 is gonna go to the turbo. It's nice if you can put it to where you can actually read the number from the top as well, but that's not always super easy. All right, here we go. Here's the second 4 right here. Boom, boom, boom. So that one goes to the turbo. Okay, perfect. All right, so this bottom one, I don't think I'm gonna be able to label it from right here, so we'll have to label it later. Okay, so now we need to remove the mounts for this guy. So it looks like there's 1, 2, and 3. Those all look like 12s to me. So let's grab our 12 and see what we can do. Whoops. All right, here we go. So break it loose. Perfect, same thing here. Get it on, break it loose. Like I said before, just be very careful not to strip anything. It's really easy to strip bolts on this car, and it can add a ton of time to a job if you do, and be extremely frustrating. So it's worth taking an extra minute to make sure that you're on there well. All right. So this guy looks pretty loose. Oh, we're leaking a little bit. Boom, look at that, it came right off. Fantastic. All right, guys, so I think this is where I'm gonna stop for the day. I just wanted to apologize. I reviewed some of the film and I realized that I didn't have the camera pointed in the correct direction. It was pointed much too high. This is my first time taking videos like this and really creating any content for YouTube, so I apologize. But I'm gonna try and essentially correct that with the following videos. So, but I think that we got a decent amount done today. Like I said, we got off that top mount, we got the inlet off, and actually or not the inlet, but the entire Cobb intake, and then we got the coolant reservoir off. So we'll go ahead and pick this up, and probably in the next video work on this alternator and continue to pull things off with a goal of removing that intake manifold. All right, take care, guys.